Welcome back to Archaeology After Dark, everybody. This is our 100th episode. I am stoked to have made it to this milestone. It has been a long 6 years making this program, and I'm borderline proud of myself.
100.
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. My
You should
guest
be.
today is Dr. Lucy Blue. Lucy, thank you so much for joining me.
That's a pleasure, absolute pleasure. No, no problem. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, I am a maritime archaeologist, which means I have a huge interest in the sea and everything to do with the sort of human interaction in the past with the sea and actually present as well, to be honest with you. I'm a professor at the University of Southampton, and I'm also the Maritime Archaeological Director of the Honor Frost Foundation, which is a charity that promotes research of maritime archaeology in the Eastern Mediterranean.
And we are all about promoting research and also the sea. We have a big fondness for the sea because, well, I mean, think about it. Without researching the sea, we wouldn't have been able to expand as a world. Like, we wouldn't have been able to cross an ocean.
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's the fundamental sort of reason for exploring maritime archaeology, because obviously it's a relatively new aspect of the discipline. So there aren't many of us, although the numbers are increasing. But I mean, it really is about that connectivity between spaces across bodies of water, not just the sea, but also lakes and down rivers and all the rest of it. And obviously the nature of how humans sort of acted in the past when they were on boats or approaching shores, it can be different from how people are on land. And also the ability to sort of connect people, the aspect of cargoes and trade is obviously different. You're seeing the ancient world from a slightly different perspective, I guess.
Well, that's something I like to think about too. But the other thing about the reason we can do maritime archaeology now, like so easily, is that technology has evolved to where we can actually do it
Yeah.
safely and more frequently, I guess,
Right.
because, diving suits. I mean, I think about the original diving suit and that one guy who decided to
Yeah.
jump into Boston Harbor and
Yeah.
that giant tin can dive.
Exactly. No, it was fairly, as you say, fairly unsafe. And they are absolutely right. I mean, the technology and the advances in technology have made a massive difference to what we can do, how far, how deep we can go, how quickly we can not just, use our eyes and ears on the seabed, but use the technology of survey, all the different type remote sensing surveys. So, I mean, even in the course of my career, that has changed absolutely hugely. So it means that we can survey bigger areas, go deeper, stay down longer, and quite importantly, be safer. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and since you specialize in the Mediterranean, or that's where your research is, I imagine the stuff you find in the Mediterranean would obviously be more ancient than, say, we would find something in the Gulf of Mexico simply just because people crossed the Mediterranean
Yeah.
sooner than they did the Atlantic.
Yeah, no, absolutely, you're spot on. No, I mean the depth of history in the Mediterranean is enormous, which I mean, I guess when I first started studying maritime archaeology, I was specializing in the sort of second millennium BC, so 4,000 years ago, the late Bronze Age. And at that point, people thought, well, what are you going to find in terms of maritime connections? And there wasn't really much going on. But I mean, now we can see maritime connections, not just in the Mediterranean, but beyond, going back 50,000 years. So our understanding of how early people were getting on boats or possibly even drifting on logs, has really expanded in that time frame. And we realize how important the sea was to connections in the past.
Yeah, I wonder, about the first people who it probably didn't seem like a good idea at the time, but it was an idea to cross an ocean. Like
Yeah,
nobody knew what was on the other side of it, or at least they probably had
Yeah.
some kind of idea, but they're like, this is an idea to cross it. Not necessarily good, but let's try it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're right. You know, it's difficult to know what goes on in the mind. What are the push or the pull factors that, sort of encourage you to leap into the unknown, in effect? And I mean, I've got colleagues at the University of Southampton who look at those deeper time frames and try and work out why people would risk effectively, their lives in many cases to cross those bodies of water. But I guess it starts on different scales, doesn't it? You go out in a boat fishing, you trade with your neighbour along the coast, you sort of expand your horizons gradually. And maybe there are also points at which, you have to go because your resources are low or because you're being threatened. So yeah, I guess that's part of what we do as maritime archaeologists, try and work out what's going on in the minds of ancient seafarers.
So this is just like I'm gonna geek out a little bit. What's the coolest thing you've ever found on like a survey, or when was like the most recent survey you went on?
Well, the most recent work I've been doing is I do a lot of coastal work actually. So maritime archaeology doesn't isn't just all underwater or in the water or underwater. I do quite a lot of coastal work, although I'm obviously a diver as well. And I've done a lot of my research has been coastal survey and also harbour archaeology. And I've spent a lot of time in Egypt, for good or for bad. No, I love it. I love it. So the most recent project I've been directing with some colleagues is a survey basically towards the Libyan border. So from a place called Mersa Matruh west. It's a huge area, actually, about 150 kilometers, but very, very little known archaeologically. And we're discovering lots of, I mean, extensive settlement sites and production areas. But to go back to your initial question, I mean, I've found lots of really exciting things underwater, but I think for me, the most important thing that we do as archaeologists is have that connection with people in the past, like that point of real connection with an individual, if you see what I mean. And I think when people ask me that question, my answer is usually we worked on a port site on the Red Sea coast of Egypt, where the organic preservation is very good. This is even on land, and I was digging an area where you could see bits of discarded material, and there was basically, how sometimes when you sit in a field on a summer's day and pick bits of grass and sort of knock them up and chuck them to one side, I found that basically in an archaeological context. And for me, that was, somebody sitting on the hill waiting for the ship to come into harbour. And for me, that was really something that was so directly connected with somebody who was living there 2,000 years ago. It was a Roman harbour. So it's not gold, it's not always the glittery, shiny things that give us as archaeologists, that connection with people in the past, and also the information that's really interesting and exciting.
Yeah, that's something that I really get a lot of joy out of, especially when I'm working with students on a project, is one of them will just be like sitting on a rock taking notes, and then you see like this look come on their face, like something has hit them, and they're like, people lived here like a long time ago. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, that is why we're here. And I'm so glad you're getting it now. Thank you.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's really, I mean, that's the joy of working with students as well, isn't it? When you can make that connection and communication so that suddenly the light bulb moment, that sort of they have a realization of why it's so exciting. And it is interesting because, as people who study archaeology, maritime archaeology, whatever, we have, I guess, an inherent understanding, but it's also about trying to communicate that to people beyond students, to the general public and that sort of thing, to get them excited and to also help them understand why this is important, to provide context, that sort of thing. So, yeah, our jobs are multiple and varied, I would say. Yes, literally on an hourly basis for me.
And that's something that I think a lot of universities and programs are starting to pick up on, is while they're training us to learn archaeology, all the science and everything,
Mm,
we also need to be taught how to communicate it to other people. Like, I've met professors and students alike who, they will actively tell me that part of the training they received wasn't actually how to communicate with people. It was just to do the research, how to do
mm,
presentations, make sure the research was
mm.
funded, but not how to like branch out to other people in the community. And I'm
Mm.
glad there's been a shift in archaeology to do that.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's particularly important for the maritime zone because, it's out there, it's underwater, it's unseen, not many people dive, so it's even more a sort of this mysterious other, if you see what I mean. So making those connections is even harder. And I think it's really important because the only way, well, A, you share your excitement and love of the past, but I think perhaps from a policy, sort of legislative perspective, if you can bring public awareness to things and the importance of our past, then that also comes, hopefully, with the idea that it puts pressure on our governments to think about that and put money into that and invest in that and to promote that. Um, it's an equation we hope is successful when it doesn't always work.
So, how does the Honor Frost Foundation fit into maritime archaeology? I know that you said they sponsor the research. Is there particular regions that they prefer to work in, or is it just blanket maritime archaeology?
No, that's a good question. So the Honor Frost Foundation was essentially established as a legacy foundation after the death, or the passing of Honor Frost. And she was a pioneering maritime archaeologist who worked, and in fact was born in Cyprus, but worked pretty much exclusively in the Eastern Mediterranean. She was British, but that's where her area of research was. And so the money that she left in this investment was left specifically to be invested in the research of maritime archaeology in the Eastern Mediterranean, which essentially equates to Cyprus, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and Egypt. So focus on war-torn countries, and we'll be there. But yeah, so it's about research, obviously, because not only, as you've already said, it's a very exciting area and one of the earliest areas where we see some very dynamic interactions in terms of maritime connectivity, but it's also an area where there isn't necessarily different in different countries. A huge educational base for maritime archaeology. The legislation isn't necessarily as, up there as it should be. So the foundation is also really invested in that lovely word, building capacity, helping with education, training, building networks, sharing skills. So it's quite broad ranging, and all of that leading to, building our understanding through research of the maritime archaeological, signature of the area. But we do quite a broad range of things. Publications as well. We have a publication wing. We have a group based in Lebanon who work closely with the Department of Antiquities because they don't have a maritime expertise within their cohort. So it's quite diverse.
So you do a lot of international work, obviously.
Mhm.
For people who are looking into studying internationally or they are thinking about it, what what would they need to get to be able to do that as far as certifications and permission wise?
So you mean if as a student or a scholar was wanting to work in a different country or
Yes.
yeah, okay. So well, I guess, I mean, specifically for the foundation, we don't just fund people from the region, we fund people who are working in the region. I mean, I guess as a student myself, I was really interested. I did my PhD was focused in the Eastern Mediterranean because I wanted to work there because I was interested in the archaeology there. So I guess that's the first step is to build up your knowledge base. And then, it's all about research questions, I guess, isn't it? What is it that strikes you as really interesting? The why questions as to, you know, why we end up finding a boat from that was built in the Western Mediterranean and the Eastern Mediterranean, or so. I think it's that drive for understanding and knowledge, which is the main thing, and building up that knowledge base and trying to, work on projects, perhaps volunteer on projects that are running in these different parts of the world. So, I mean, it depends on the level, your stage of career as well, obviously. But I think having particular skill sets is useful. So, for example, I've literally just come off a conversation with a an early career geomorphologist. So he's looking at coastal geomorphology, coastal geology, and those, more specific skill sets can be very useful when you're trying to build a team of maritime archaeologists.
Sorry, I got lost in thought there for a second.
No, 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 it's all right. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. I know the feeling.
Oh, um, so students, when they actually start working with you on maritime archaeology, or they're like, say it's their first time out on one of these projects, do
Mhm.
you have like a speech you give them like, oh, this is exciting and everything, but also we're here to be cautious and learn at the same time?
Well, I mean, usually the students that I work with, they've already had some background, they're usually students from universities, so they've already got some understanding of the ethics around it and the methodological approaches. What I try and do is be very clear about why we're doing what we're doing, what our objectives are, and how we hope to achieve them, and then be very clear about what their role is within those projects. I mean, that can change, obviously, and try and really draw out their interests. So, going back to what we were saying just now about, having particular skill bases, we can't all be good at everything. So, recognize, trying to identify which particular aspects interest them and that they're good at, and encouraging them and helping them to sort of learn. So usually the context in which they have arrived there has already given them that background understanding of why it's important and what they should or shouldn't do, particularly when it comes to the ethical side of things and, taking photographs and not taking objects unless you're actually on an excavation, etc., etc. So I hope that makes it clear.
Yeah. And I was just thinking how much different it must be to create like a learning environment while you're actually out in an environment
Mm.
like you're actually on a boat on the sea instead of, somewhere that you can actually
Yeah,
just come and go from in a
yeah.
vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the boat is a vehicle. I mean, quite often, it presents more challenges, definitely. I mean, I was doing a project off the south coast of Cyprus, and where we were actually working meant that we had to be on the boat the whole time. We only had small ribs, like little, inflatable boats or small hard chine boats, which means you're in cramped spaces. You've got all your equipment. Often it's quite hot, so you need to think about the exposure to the sun and then the weather conditions. So it can be quite challenging. But I also think that comes with, that sort of building teams and working together. And personally, I think it's much, from my perspective, I find it more exciting and perhaps easier in a way to teach people in situ. Because they can see it, they can get it, they understand, hopefully, most of the time, why you're suggesting that they do things this way and why we have chosen to do this next, if you see what I mean. When you're explaining that to somebody in a classroom, where, we did a geophysics survey and then we targeted these sites, it all becomes a bit sort of, I don't know, stale in a way. It's not quite as visceral or in the moment as when you are actually in the field. And I think it's a really good way for people to learn. And I guess you'd have to ask the students whether they'd agree with that or not. But I think that's why we do field schools, isn't it? It's why we do summer schools. It's why we have students on projects.
Yeah, and that's, I think one of the most beneficial slash exciting things about being a student in archaeology is you actually get to see the huge shift in the environment from being in a classroom or in a lab to
Yeah,
actually being out in the
yeah.
field, in the environment with the elements and probably getting at least a second degree sunburn.
Yeah, well, hopefully not, but yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I think that's, that archaeology is exciting because of the subject matters, but it's also exciting because you're doing. When I was a student, I worked, oh gosh, more war-torn countries, but I worked out in Iraq. I was an undergraduate. I had the privilege of going to northern Iraq and working on a massive tell site in terms of diving. I've dived all around the world, and that's the opportunity that maritime archaeology or archaeology can give you. And I guess in some ways it's one of the drivers. It opens doors to, you know, new worlds, new cultures, not just the ancient cultures, but also the modern ones. And I think it's an amazing way of learning about, you know, different approaches to life, different religions, different cuisines, different, but you're right, that goes back to that key question of how do you create those opportunities? And I think it is, I remember they don't exist anymore, but in the past we used to write letters. And people often didn't reply when you were saying, "Could I come and work on your project, please?" But it's that thing. It's about being bold and putting yourself out there and saying, I have a real interest and just trying to bring visibility to your excitement and that way then things start happening. That's the way that I would select people to work on my projects or to come to my workshops, or it's they've got to have an ability and an interest. Obviously they've got to be capable, but they've also it's the enthusiasm and the energy they bring to it, I think, is really important.
And I think that's something, especially when people look at archaeology students, is it's true. Universities don't, we don't have as many students as say like an engineering department or like a hard science department what would, but our students don't lack the enthusiasm. In
Mm.
fact, the archaeology students I end up working with have more enthusiasm than usually they know what to do with, and they are
Yeah. Yeah.
bordering on like aggressive with how they approach learning. Like
Well, I
they
mean,
just
I think,
they want to like get
yeah.
a book and like eat the knowledge out of it.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, all know that being an archaeologist at whatever level, whether it's on the land or underwater, you're never going to be a rich man or a rich woman. But, so your drivers, unlike medicine or engineering, or I mean, not to say that's the single driver with these other disciplines, but are purely about that thirst of knowledge. And I mean, that's why, I mean, I find our students at Southampton, they're just amazing. They're so full of enthusiasm and ideas and supporting each other and volunteering to help with things. So, you've got it's a subject that is it's quite niche, and I think it's all premised on that love of the past, and also, but as we were saying, also the way that you do things, because it's so interdisciplinary. I mean, I studied for my undergraduate. I did archaeology, geography, and politics, and I think that those three skills really helped me become a good archaeologist. I hope that others would consider me a good archaeologist, because you need that broad breadth of background, because there's so many different skills. As you said, you can go down the hard science route in archaeology. You can be looking down microscopes in labs, or you can be out there in the field, trundling your RTK around to survey a site. So the approaches are so varied, and I think it's an exciting career. Let's
So this is like a fun byproduct of being an archaeologist. You do end up being one of the coolest people in the room when you go to dinner parties. Like you have the best stories. Like everybody wants the story. Like, so what's the coolest thing you found? What's your favorite dinosaur?
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, though, isn't it? As a maritime archaeologist, so yes, you're absolutely right. But then they start asking me about biology, and it's just like, no, hang on a minute. I'm studying people, not critters in the past. So but you're right. Dinosaurs don't really fit into our remit either. So, but yes, I think it's probably much more of a conversation piece discussing, your ledger in an accountant business or something like that. So, but yeah. I think maritime archaeology more so because there's even less of us and we're underwater and there's the sort of ideas of shipwrecks that are sitting proud of the seabed and treasure like flying around, which is obviously not reality. But um, although I was in a conversation with somebody earlier today, actually all the way over in China, and they literally had been excavating a ship from, I think it was the 19th century, that they lifted in a massive container in its entirety, a ship of nearly 40 meters in length, and going back to what you were saying about the technology, the Chinese have got amazing technology now to lift and preserve and display, and yeah, it's so. Anyway, sorry, tangents, just went on off on one.
No, that is the best part of doing this show is the tangents. Like I've learned
Mm.
so much from the other 99 episodes I've done
I
this
can't
show.
I can't
Patting
believe I'm the
myself,
100th.
patting myself on the back again for the 100.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, it's impressive that I mean, yeah, I think it's a lovely way to communicate with people through doing podcasts and sharing enthusiasm and knowledge, as you say. So it's really great. Can't believe I'm the 100th.
So we're about out of time. Lucy, do you
Mm.
have any last minute advice you'd want to give out to students or anything you'd recommend they read? Because I know a lot of them are probably getting ready for spring break and some of them don't know how to
Mm.
switch it off when they leave.
Yeah, that's true. Gosh, there's so much literature out there at the moment. I mean, I think I've just been, yeah. God, I don't know where to start with that last reading question. Cyprian Brubank. Have a look at him if you're interested in not just the sort of maritime archaeology of the Mediterranean, but also more of a sort of theoretical way of looking at things. So it's not just the technique side, but it puts it in its broader context. I think that's always a really good book to have a look at. He's Cambridge based. And I really think, just go back to the advice is stick with it. If you've got that enthusiasm and that joy, then, you know, let that guide you. And you do need to make an effort. You need to, get yourself out there and talk to people and volunteer as much as you're able. And it'll come together. So good luck.
Yeah, we do wish everybody who decides to dip their toe into archaeology, you're actually dipping your toe if you get into maritime archaeology. You wouldn't necessarily.
Literally. Yeah,
But
literally.
yeah, and there's inspiration out there for everything you want to do. You just have to know where to look.
Absolutely. Well, if you're interested, I'm going to do a little plug at the end, but if you're interested in the archaeology of the Eastern Mediterranean, then go and have a look on maritime archaeology, obviously, and coastal. Have a look on the Honor Frost website because there's loads of information there about all the projects that we support and the opportunities that we offer as well.
Yeah, you'll find a link for the Honor Frost Foundation in the description of the video. So make
Oh,
sure you
brilliant. Thank
follow
you.
that and go down the rabbit hole on whatever you like.
Yeah, exactly. Come to a conference. Yes. Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, thank you for adding that link. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, everybody, that is going to do it here for us on this episode. Thank you for sticking with me for, again, patting myself on the back for the 100 episodes so far. I don't have any intention of stopping anytime soon unless YouTube decides to come after me and cancel the show or something. uh,
I'm sure they
so,
won't do that
again,
time
thank
now.
you all so much for your love and support and what we do as archaeologists. We couldn't do it without you, honestly.
Brilliant. Thank you.